Chimpanzee invades hospital with baby in arms, nurse cried when she discovered the reason. Lightning split the Seattle sky as Emily Matthews adjusted her nurse's cap in the emergency room of Central Seattle Hospital. The late-night shift had been relatively quiet until the automatic doors burst open, bringing with them a gust of wind and an impossible sight. A soaking wet chimpanzee cradling a bundle wrapped in what appeared to be a research facility jacket. The security guard reached for his radio, but Emily raised her hand. "Wait," she whispered, her heart pounding. 15 years of nursing experience hadn't prepared her for this moment. The chimp's eyes, intelligent and desperate, locked with hers. In them she saw not threat but profound exhaustion and something else, a mother's worry. "Everyone stay back," Emily commanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She took a cautious step forward, her hands visible. The chimpanzee, trembling from cold and exhaustion, made a soft whimpering sound. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician, appeared beside Emily. "This is unprecedented," she breathed. "Emily, be careful." The chimp took 3 unsteady steps forward, its powerful arms cradling the bundle with surprising gentleness. As Emily drew closer, she could hear small whimpers coming from within the makeshift blanket. The baby. "It's okay," Emily soothed, speaking to both the chimp and the infant. "You're safe here." She extended her arms slowly, and in a moment that would forever change her life, the chimpanzee carefully transferred the bundle to her. The infant was cold, wet, and alarmingly quiet. Dr. Chen immediately took charge, directing Emily to bring the baby to the nearest examination room. As they rushed to assess the child, the chimpanzee followed. Its movements deliberate and protective. "Male, approximately 6 months old," Dr. Chen announced, quickly examining the infant. "Mild hypothermia, dehydrated, but breathing is steady." She turned to a resident. "Get me warm blankets and start preparing for IV fluids." Emily noticed a small tag on the jacket wrapped around the baby. "Property of Pacific Northwest Wildlife Research Center." She showed it to Dr. Chen, who immediately contacted the authorities. Within 30 minutes, Detective James Carter arrived, his tall frame filling the doorway of the examination room. The chimpanzee, who had refused to leave the baby's side, tensed at his arrival. "We've got a situation," Carter announced, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "That baby matches the description of missing infant Thomas Walker. His parents, Dr. Richard and Dr. Catherine Walker, are prominent wildlife researchers. They were reported missing 3 hours ago when they failed to return from their shift at the research center." Emily felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the sleeping infant, now warmed and stabilized. "The jacket," she said. "It's from their research center." Dr. Anderson, a primatologist who had been called in, entered the room with careful steps. He studied the chimpanzee with professional interest. "This is remarkable," he said softly. "This is Lucy. She was one of the Walker's research subjects. She lost her own infant last month." The revelation hung heavy in the air. Emily watched as Lucy sat in the corner, her eyes never leaving the baby. The chimp's maternal instinct had potentially saved this child's life, but from what and where were the Walkers? As if reading her thoughts, Detective Carter pulled out his notebook. "The research center is located near Mount Baker. The Walkers were last seen leaving their laboratory around 4 p.m. Their car never made it back to Seattle." Thunder crashed outside, and the lights flickered momentarily. Lucy made a distressed sound, moving closer to the baby's bassinet. Emily found herself drawn to both of them, the traumatized primate and the orphaned infant, bound together by circumstance and something deeper. "There's more," Carter continued, lowering his voice. "The Walkers were preparing to publish a major paper. Something about illegal logging operations threatening endangered species in protected areas. They'd been receiving threats." Dr. Anderson nodded grimly. "They were passionate conservationists. Catherine had evidence of corporate involvement in deforestation. She confided in me last week that they were close to exposing something big." Emily looked down at baby Thomas, peaceful now in his sleep, unaware of the storm surrounding his young life. Lucy reached out with one gentle finger to touch the baby's hand, and Emily saw tears in the chimp's eyes, and sight so human it took her breath away. Whatever happened out there, Emily said, her voice firm with resolve. "This little one is safe now, and I think we owe that to Lucy." As the storm raged outside, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. In the sterile halls of Central Seattle Hospital, an unlikely guardian had delivered precious cargo, and with it, a mystery that would unravel in ways none of them could predict. The following morning dawned grey and misty, typical Seattle weather that seemed to mirror the uncertainty hanging over the hospital. Emily Rutt, who had refused to leave after her shift ended, sat in the pediatric ward watching Thomas sleep while Lucy dozed in a corner, the hospital administration having made unprecedented accommodations for their unusual visitor. Dr. Anderson entered quietly, carrying a thick file. "I've been reviewing the Walkers' research," he said, pulling up a chair beside Emily. "They were extraordinary scientists, but more than that, they revolutionized our understanding of primate emotional intelligence." Emily glanced at Lucy, who had opened her eyes at the sound of voices. "And tell me about them," she requested, sensing there was more to this story. "Catherine Walker was brilliant," Anderson began, opening the file. "She specialized in primate maternal behavior. When Lucy lost her baby last month, Catherine was devastated. She spent countless hours with Lucy, documenting her grieving process." He paused, showing Emily a photograph of Catherine, a woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and an infectious smile, sitting with Lucy. "So the thing is," Anderson continued, lowering his voice, "Catherine discovered something unusual in the infant chimp's blood work before it died, something that shouldn't have been there." Detective Carter chose that moment to enter, his expression grim. "We found their car," he announced. "Crashed off Forest Service Road 2810, near the research center. No sign of the Walkers, but..." He pulled out his phone, showing them photographs. "The crash wasn't an accident. The brake lines were cut." Emily felt her blood run cold. Lucy became agitated, moving closer to Thomas's crib. "She knows something," Emily said softly. "Look at her behavior. She's not just being protective, she's afraid." Dr. Anderson nodded thoughtfully. "Lucy was always their most intelligent subject. Her cognitive abilities tested off the charts." Into the room, clutching a tablet. "Dr. Anderson, you need to see this," she said breathlessly. "We ran the blood tests you requested on Thomas. There's something strange in his results." Anderson took the tablet, his face paling as he read. This is identical to what Catherine found in Lucy's infant," he whispered. But that's impossible unless..." He trailed off, his eyes widening with realization. Emily leaned forward. "Unless what?" Before Anderson could answer, Lucy became extremely agitated, making urgent vocalizations and pointing repeatedly at Thomas's medical chart. Detective Carter watched in amazement as the chimp then moved to the window, gesturing at the mountains visible in the distance. "She's trying to tell us something," Emily said, standing. "Dr. Anderson, what did Catherine discover? What's in Thomas's blood?" Anderson closed the file slowly, his face grave. "Catherine's last email to me mentioned a compound she'd never seen before, something synthetic, but designed to appear natural. She traced it to water samples from streams near illegal logging sites." "Are you saying someone was deliberately contaminating the water supply?" Carter asked sharply. "Not just contaminating," Anderson replied. "Catherine believed they were testing something that affected primate DNA. The logging operation was just a cover for a much larger experiment." Lucy suddenly became very still, her eyes fixed on Thomas. Emily followed her gaze and noticed something she hadn't before. A small birthmark on the baby's shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. She'd seen that same mark in the photograph of Lucy's infant. "Oh my God," Emily breathed, the pieces starting to fall into place. The Walkers weren't just researchers, were they? They were whistleblowers. Carter's phone buzzed with a text. His expression hardened as he read it. "We just found something in their lab. A hidden safe. Inside was a video file labeled Insurance Policy." He looked up at them. "And a list of names. Corporate executives. Government officials." Lucy moved to Thomas's crib again, touching the birthmark gently. In that gesture, Emily saw not just protection, but recognition. The truth was beginning to emerge, and it was more extraordinary than any of them could have imagined. "We need to watch that video," Emily said firmly. "And we need to protect this baby, because I think Lucy didn't just randomly save him from that crash. I think she's been protecting him from something much bigger." As if in response, thunder rumbled in the distance, and Lucy placed her hand protectively over Thomas's small form. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The hospital's small conference room felt cramped with Detective Carter, Dr. Anderson, Emily, and 2 security guards crowded around a laptop. Lucy had refused to leave Thomas's side, so they'd brought the baby to the conference room in a portable crib, the chimp following attentively. Catherine Walker's face filled the screen, her expression tense but determined. The video's timestamp showed it was recorded just 3 days ago. "If you're watching this," Catherine began, "something has happened to Richard and me. What we've discovered at the research center goes beyond corporate greed or environmental destruction. They're using the logging operation as cover for genetic experimentation." Emily felt her heart race as Catherine continued, her words careful and measured. "The company, Biosynth Industries, has been introducing synthetic compounds into the local watershed. They're testing the effects on primates, studying genetic adaptations. But it's not just about the animals." Catherine's voice cracked slightly. "They're preparing for human trials." Richard Walker appeared on screen beside his wife. "We have proof that Biosynth has already begun affecting human DNA through controlled exposure. Their goal is to create enhanced genetic adaptations that can be passed down through generations. They're playing God, and they don't care who they hurt in the process." The video shifted to show laboratory data, genetic sequences, and most shockingly, side-by-side comparisons of blood samples from Lucy's infant and human test subjects. "Lucy's baby didn't die from natural causes," Catherine revealed, her voice breaking. "The genetic modifications were too aggressive. But they learned from their mistakes. They've refined the process, and now—" She stopped, looking off camera with fear. Richard took over. "Our son Thomas shows signs of successful modification. His genetic structure has been altered but stabilized. He's what they've been working toward, and they'll do anything to get him back." Emily looked at Thomas, sleeping peacefully while Lucy watched over him. The birthmark suddenly held new significance, not a random mark, but perhaps a sign of his altered DNA. "Lucy understands more than anyone knows," Catherine continued. "She's not just intelligent, she's evolved. The compounds affected her differently, enhanced her cognitive abilities beyond what we thought possible. She's been trying to communicate with us, to warn us." Detective Carter paused the video. "This explains why she brought Thomas to the hospital. She wasn't just saving him from the crash, she was protecting him from Biosynth." Dr. Anderson nodded slowly. "Lucy must have witnessed the attack on the Walkers. She knew Thomas wouldn't be safe at the research center." "There's more," Carter said, resuming the video. Catherine's face filled the screen again. "We've hidden the complete research data where they'll never find it. Lucy knows. She's the key to everything. Trust her, and please, protect our son. Don't let them—" The video cut off abruptly. Silence filled the conference room. Emily looked at Lucy, who met her gaze with an intelligence that now seemed both miraculous and haunting. "We need to move them," Carter announced. "If Biosynth figures out where Thomas is—" A commotion in the hallway interrupted him. Through the conference room's windows, they could see men in suits speaking with hospital administration. "They're already here," Emily whispered, moving protectively toward Thomas and Lucy. Lucy became agitated, making urgent gestures toward the ceiling. Dr. Anderson watched her closely. "The research center," he said suddenly. "It has an extensive tunnel system for observing primates in a controlled environment. Is she trying to tell us there's something similar here?" Emily's eyes widened. "The old service tunnels. This hospital was built in the 1940s. There's a whole network of underground passages that connected different buildings. Most are sealed off now, but—" Lucy nodded vigorously, understanding every word. Detective Carter made a quick decision. "Emily, you take Thomas and Lucy. Use the tunnels. Anderson and I will deal with our visitors and buy you time. We need to find what the Walkers hid before Biosynth does." As Emily gathered Thomas in her arms, Lucy already moving toward the conference room's second door, she realized their journey was far from over. The truth about Thomas's genetic modifications, the fate of his parents, and the full scope of Biosynth's experiments were still waiting to be uncovered. And somewhere in the city, hidden in a place only Lucy knew, lay the evidence that could expose it all. The service tunnels beneath Seattle Central Hospital were a maze of dimly lit corridors, their walls lined with decades-old pipes and electrical conduits. Emily clutched Thomas close to her chest, while Lucy moved ahead with surprising confidence, her movements suggesting familiarity with underground spaces. "How did you know about these tunnels?" Emily whispered to Lucy, though she didn't expect an answer. To her astonishment, Lucy made a series of gestures, pointing to her eyes, then making a motion like reading a paper. "Saw the research files," Emily realized. "You saw the hospital blueprints in the Walker's lab, didn't you?" Lucy nodded, her intelligence now seeming less surprising and more remarkable with each passing moment. She stopped suddenly, raising her hand in a very human gesture of warning. Footsteps echoed from a connecting tunnel ahead. They pressed themselves against the wall, Emily's heart pounding. The footsteps grew closer, then faded away down another passage. Lucy relaxed slightly but pointed urgently forward. They needed to keep moving. Emily's phone vibrated, a text from Detective Carter. "Biosynth CEO Marcus Sterling here with court order. Claims Thomas is part of classified research program, stalling them. Anderson analyzing Walker's data. Be careful." As they moved deeper into the tunnel system, Emily noticed Lucy was leading them in a specific direction, not just away from danger, but towards something. The chimp's purposeful navigation suggested she had a destination in mind. They emerged into a larger chamber that appeared to be an old mechanical room. Lucy immediately went to a corner where a rusty filing cabinet stood against the wall. With surprising strength, she moved it aside, revealing a small alcove. "What is it, Lucy?" Emily whispered, adjusting Thomas in her arms. The baby remained remarkably quiet, as if sensing the need for silence. Lucy reached into the alcove and pulled out a weathered leather satchel. Emily's breath caught. On the side was the name K. Walker in faded letters. Catherine knew about these tunnels too, Emily realized. She left this here. But how did you know? Before Lucy could respond, Thomas began to stir, making small whimpering sounds. As Emily tried to soothe him, something extraordinary happened. Lucy approached, placed her hand gently on Thomas's forehead. Emily watched in amazement as Thomas drifted back to sleep, his tiny hand wrapped around one of Lucy's fingers. The bond between them was undeniable, transcending species and science. The satchel contained a laptop, several USB drives, and a handwritten journal. Emily opened the journal carefully, finding Catherine's elegant handwriting. Final entry. "What we've discovered goes beyond genetic modification. The compound doesn't just alter DNA, it creates a form of evolutionary leap, enhancing not just physical capabilities, but emotional and cognitive connections." Lucy's enhanced intelligence was just the beginning. The bond she shared with her infant, and now with Thomas, suggests a level of empathic connection we never thought possible. But Biosynth doesn't understand what they've created. They see weapons and profit. They don't see the miracle of what's actually happening. Emily's phone buzzed again, this time a series of urgent messages from Dr. Anderson. Analyzed blood work, Thomas's DNA showing unprecedented changes. Not just modification, evolution. Lucy's presence seems to stabilize his genetic structure. They need each other to survive. As if confirming this, Thomas stirred again, reaching out in his sleep toward Lucy, who immediately moved closer. Emily noticed something she hadn't before. When they touched, Thomas's birthmark seemed to emit a faint, barely perceptible glow. A distant door slammed somewhere in the tunnel system. Lucy tensed, her eyes fixed on one of the corridors. They weren't alone anymore. Emily quickly packed the satchel and lifted Thomas. "Which way?" she whispered to Lucy. The chimp's response was immediate and unexpected. She moved to a section of wall and pressed against it in a specific pattern. To Emily's astonishment, a hidden door swung open, revealing a narrow passage. "Catherine, you brilliant woman," Emily breathed, understanding now why the Walkers had chosen this hospital. The tunnels weren't just escape routes, they were part of an elaborate plan. As they slipped through the hidden door, Emily heard voices echoing through the tunnels behind them. Lucy sealed the entrance, and they found themselves in a passage that seemed newer than the others, with modern security panels on the walls. The truth was leading them deeper underground, into the heart of a mystery that was rewriting the rules of evolution itself. And somewhere above them, the people who would kill to keep that mystery hidden were closing in. The hidden passage led Emily, Thomas, and Lucy through a series of increasingly modern corridors. The rusty pipes and crumbling concrete of the old service tunnels gave way to sleek metal walls and softly glowing LED strips. Emily's mind raced, trying to comprehend the scope of what the walkers had built beneath the hospital. "Catherine, what were you really working on?" Emily whispered, clutching Thomas closer as Lucy led them deeper into the unknown. They emerged into a vast circular chamber that took Emily's breath away. The room was filled with advanced computer terminals, medical equipment, and what appeared to be a state-of-the-art genetics lab. At the center stood a large, cylindrical tank filled with a softly glowing blue liquid. Lucy moved directly to one of the computer terminals, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with surprising dexterity. Screens came to life, displaying complex genetic sequences and data streams that Emily couldn't begin to understand. A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the room, and Emily gasped as Catherine Walker's image appeared before them. "If you're seeing this," the hologram said, "then Lucy has brought you to our sanctuary. I hope that Thomas is with you and that he's safe." The holographic Catherine looked directly at Emily, as if she had somehow known who would be there. "Oh, I'm sure you have questions. The truth is almost beyond belief, but you need to understand." The hologram waved its hand, and the room filled with swirling images of DNA strands and cellular structures. The compound biosynth created doesn't just modify genetics, it awakens dormant potential within our DNA, potential that links us to every living thing on this planet. Lucy made a soft sound, reaching out to touch Thomas's forehead again. The baby's birthmark glowed more brightly in response. "What you're seeing," holographic Catherine continued, "is the next step in human evolution. But it's not just about us. The compound creates a bridge, a connection between species that we never thought possible. Lucy isn't just intelligent, she's part of an awakening, a new form of consciousness that spans the gap between humans and our primate cousins." Emily's mind reeled at the implications. She looked at Lucy, seeing her not as a test subject or even just a remarkably smart animal, but as something new, a pioneer of interspecies communication and understanding. "Thomas is the key," Catherine's hologram continued. "His genetic structure is the perfect bridge between human and primate DNA. With him, we could guide this evolution, ensure it brings enlightenment instead of exploitation. But in the wrong hands..." The hologram flickered, and Richard Walker appeared beside his wife. "My biosynth doesn't understand what they've created. They see military applications, designer humans, a way to control evolution itself. They don't realize that what's happening can't be controlled. It's a gift, meant for all life, not just humanity." Lucy moved to the central tank, placing her hand on the glass. The blue liquid inside swirled in response to her touch. "This chamber," Catherine explained, "contains the pure form of the compound. It's not just a chemical, it's alive in its own way. It responds to conscious thought, to emotion. Lucy, Thomas, and others like them are the only ones who can safely interact with it." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red warning lights flashed, and security shutters began to descend over the entrances. "They've found us," Emily realized, panic rising in her throat. The hologram of the walkers looked alarmed. "If the security systems have been triggered, you're in danger. There's an escape pod in the far wall. It will take you to safety, but you must hurry." Lucy was already moving, pressing her hand against a hidden panel. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a sleek, egg-shaped pod. "Wait," Emily said, looking back at the hologram. "What happened to you? Are you still alive?" Catherine's holographic face showed a mix of sadness and determination. "We've gone into hiding. There are others like Thomas, other children and primates affected by the compound. We're gathering them, protecting them. Find Dr. Elena Rossi in Vancouver. She'll know what to do next." The sounds of shouting and pounding footsteps echoed from the corridors outside. The security shutters were nearly closed. "Go!" Richard's hologram urged, Protect Thomas, trust Lucy. The future of two species rests in your hands. As the hologram faded, Emily made a split-second decision. She grabbed Catherine's journal and several of the data drives from a nearby console, then rushed to the escape pod with Thomas. Lucy was already inside, beckoning urgently. Just as the pod's door sealed shut, Emily saw figures in black tactical gear burst into the chamber. She caught a glimpse of a man in an expensive suit, Marcus Sterling, she assumed, his face a mask of fury as the pod shot into a hidden tunnel. As they accelerated away from the secret lab, Emily held Thomas close, Lucy's protective arm around them both. They were racing not just from danger, but toward a future that would redefine the very nature of humanity and its place in the world. The escape pod rocketed through underground tunnels, its destination unknown, carrying with it the hope for a new kind of evolution and the terrible risk of what might happen if they failed. The escape pod hurtled through a maze of underground tunnels, its smooth ride belying the chaos they'd left behind. Emily cradled Thomas, while Lucy sat perfectly still, her eyes closed as if in deep concentration. The pod's interior was bathed in a soft blue light, reminiscent of the mysterious tank in the Walker's secret lab. After what seemed like hours but was likely only minutes, the pod began to slow. It came to a gentle stop, and the door slid open, revealing a small, dimly lit cavern. As they stepped out, Emily noticed a faint, salty smell in the air. "Are we under the ocean?" she wondered aloud. Lucy nodded, pointing to a series of glowing markers on the cavern wall. She began to follow them, and Emily, adjusting Thomas in her arms, had no choice but to trust the chimp's guidance once again. The markers led them through a twisting passage that gradually sloped upward. The sound of waves grew louder, and soon they emerged onto a small, secluded beach. The Seattle skyline twinkled in the distance across the water. They had traveled far from the city center. Lucy immediately became alert, scanning their surroundings. She made a series of quick gestures, pointing to a cluster of rocks further down the beach. As they approached, Emily saw a weathered backpack hidden in a crevice. Inside, they found clothes, cash, a prepaid phone, and a set of car keys with a rental agreement. "Catherine thought of everything," Emily murmured, quickly changing into the provided clothes and wrapping Thomas in a warm blanket from the bag. The prepaid phone had a single text message: "Sunrise Motel, Room 12. Elena waits." They found the rental car hidden under a camouflage tarp in a nearby grove of trees. As Emily settled Thomas into a car seat that was already installed, she marveled at the extent of the Walkers' preparations. Lucy, however, hesitated at the car door, looking back toward the ocean with an expression Emily could only describe as longing. "Lucy," Emily said softly, "I know this is hard. You've done so much already. If you want to go back to find a safe place in the forest, I'd understand." The chimp turned to her, and in that moment, Emily saw not an animal, but a person making a profound choice. Lucy looked at Thomas, then back at Emily, and decisively climbed into the car. As they drove through the night towards Vancouver, Emily's mind whirled with questions. Who was Dr. Elena Rossi? How many others like Thomas were out there? And what would Biosynth do next? They reached the Sunrise Motel just as dawn was breaking. Room 12 was at the far end, partially hidden by overgrown shrubbery. Emily approached cautiously, Lucy close behind, Thomas secure in her arms. Before she could knock, the door opened. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp green eyes stood before them. "Quickly," she said with a slight Italian accent, ushering them inside. Once the door was locked, Dr. Elena Rossi turned to them, her gaze immediately drawn to Thomas. "So this is the child," she breathed, then looked at Lucy with equal wonder. "And you're even more remarkable than Catherine described." "Dr. Rossi," Emily began, "we need answers. What's really going on? What's happening to Thomas?" Eleanor sighed, gesturing for them to sit. "What's happening is nothing short of miraculous, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The compound biosynth created, it's not just advancing evolution, it's awakening something within us, within all primates, that has been dormant for millennia." She pulled out a tablet, showing them images of brain scans. "These are from Lucy." And Lucy made a series of gestures, and to Emily's surprise, Eleanor responded with her own gestures. They were communicating in a sign language Emily didn't recognize. "Lucy says," Eleanor translated, "that she can sense Thomas's thoughts, his emotions, not just empathy but a true connection, and it's growing stronger." Emily looked down at Thomas, who was watching Lucy with unusual focus for an infant. "Is it dangerous?" she asked. "Not inherently," Elena replied, "but in the wrong hands, those with this connection could be exploited, turned into weapons or tools. Biosynth sees the military potential, soldiers with heightened senses, unbreakable mental links. They don't understand that what's awakening is beyond their control." A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Elena moved quickly, pulling aside a curtain to reveal a hidden exit. "We've been compromised," she said urgently. "There's a safe house in the mountains. Take this." She handed Emily a small device. "It will guide you there. I'll hold them off." As Elena moved to confront whoever was at the door, Emily felt a sudden, inexplicable urge. She handed Thomas to Lucy and grabbed Elena's arm. "Come with us," she insisted, though she couldn't explain why. Elena hesitated, then nodded. They slipped out the back just as the sound of splintering wood filled the air. Racing to the car, Emily realized their journey was far from over. They were on the run, carrying with them a secret that could change the course of human history. As they sped away from the motel, Thomas cooed softly in Lucy's arms. The chimp's eyes filled with a wisdom beyond words. The road ahead was uncertain, but Emily knew one thing for sure. Their fates were now intertwined in ways she was only beginning to understand. The next evolution of humanity was in their hands, and the forces that sought to control it were right behind them. The winding mountain roads of British Columbia stretched before them as Emily navigated the rental car with steady hands. In the back seat, Lucy cradled Thomas, their connection growing more apparent with each passing hour. Dr. Elena Rossi sat in the passenger seat, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for any signs of pursuit. "We're close," Elena said, checking the small device she had given Emily earlier. "The safe house should be just over the next ridge." As they crested the hill, a sprawling log cabin came into view, nestled against a backdrop of towering pines and snow-capped peaks. But something was wrong. The front door stood ajar, and there were tire tracks in the muddy driveway that looked fresh. "Stop the car," Elena commanded, her voice tense. Emily pulled over, cutting the engine. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, Lucy became agitated, making urgent gestures toward the trees to their left. Before anyone could react, a figure emerged from the woods, a man in his 30s, with kind eyes and a weary expression. "Richard Walker," Elena breathed in disbelief. Emily's heart raced. "Thomas's father, but how—" Richard approached the car cautiously. "Elena, thank God you're here. We don't have much time. They're coming." As if on cue, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. Richard quickly ushered them toward a concealed path leading away from the cabin. "There's a bunker," he explained as they hurried through the underbrush. "Catherine's there with the others." "Others?" Emily asked, struggling to keep up while carrying Thomas. Richard nodded grimly. "Other children like Thomas, other primates like Lucy. We've been gathering them, trying to protect them from biosynth." They reached a cleverly disguised entrance set into the side of a hill. Richard pressed his hand against a hidden panel, and a door slid open. As they entered, Emily gasped. The bunker was a technological marvel, filled with advanced equipment and glowing screens. But what truly took her breath away were the occupants. Half a dozen children, ranging from infants to young teens, sat in a circle with an equal number of chimpanzees and orangutans. They seemed to be communicating without words, their eyes closed in deep concentration. Catherine Walker emerged from an adjoining room, her face lighting up at the sight of Thomas. "You made it," she said, tears in her eyes as she embraced her son. As the group settled in, Richard and Catherine explained the full scope of what was happening. The compound hadn't just enhanced intelligence or created a genetic bridge between species. It had awakened a form of consciousness that transcended traditional boundaries. "The children and the primates," Catherine explained, "they're developing abilities we can hardly comprehend. telepathy, shared consciousness, even the power to influence the physical world with their minds. But it goes beyond that, Richard added. They're connecting to something larger, something ancient. It's as if the compound has opened a door to a type of awareness that's been dormant in our DNA for millennia. Elena nodded, her expression grave. This is why Biosynth is so desperate to control it. Imagine an army with these abilities, or the power to manipulate the thoughts of entire populations. Emily watched as Thomas, now in Lucy's arms, reached out toward the circle of children and primates. A soft glow emanated from his birthmark, and the entire group turned to look at them, their eyes filled with a wisdom that seemed impossibly old. "He's the key," Catherine said softly. "Thomas's genetic makeup is unique. He can stabilize the changes in the others, help them control their abilities. Without him, the awakening could spiral out of control." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the bunker. Richard rushed to a control panel. "They've found us. Biosynth, military. They're all here. We need to get the children out," Eleanor said urgently. Catherine shook her head. "There's no time. But maybe we don't need to run anymore." She turned to the circle of enhanced humans and primates. "It's time," she said simply. As if they had been waiting for this moment, the children and primates joined hands and paws. Thomas squirmed in Lucy's arms, reaching out to join the circle. Lucy, understanding, gently placed him in the center. The air in the bunker began to thicken with an energy Emily could feel but not see. The glowing birthmark on Thomas's shoulder pulsed brightly, and suddenly, every screen in the facility came to life, broadcasting images across the globe. "What's happening?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. "They're showing the world the truth," Richard said in awe. "Every secret Biosynth tried to hide, every piece of evidence we gathered, it's all being transmitted worldwide." Outside, they could hear shouts of confusion as the approaching forces received the same transmission. The truth of the awakening, of the next step in human and primate evolution, was being revealed to all. In that moment, as the boundaries between species and consciousness blurred, Emily realized they stood at a turning point in history. The evolution that Biosynth had tried to control was now guiding itself, with Thomas and Lucy at its heart. The door to the bunker burst open, but instead of soldiers, a group of awestruck scientists and government officials entered, their weapons lowered, faces filled with wonder at the scene before them. The awakening could no longer be contained or controlled. A new chapter in the story of life on Earth was beginning, and its first words were being written in the shared consciousness of humans and primates united. As the glowing energy filled the room, Emily felt a profound sense of hope. Whatever came next, she knew that the bond between Lucy, Thomas, and all those touched by this evolutionary leap would shape a future beyond imagination. The days following the revelation at the bunker were a whirlwind of global reactions, diplomatic negotiations, and scientific wonder. Emily found herself at the center of it all, a reluctant spokesperson for a change that was reshaping the very fabric of human society. World leaders convened emergency sessions, ethicists debated the implications, and scientists from every field clamored to understand the phenomenon that had been unleashed. But at the heart of it all were Thomas, Lucy, and the growing circle of awakened humans and primates. 1 month after the event, Emily stood on the balcony of a newly established research center in the Pacific Northwest. The facility, jointly operated by an international coalition, was dedicated to understanding and nurturing the awakening. Below her, in a specially designed habitat, she could see Thomas playing with other children and young primates. Their interactions a beautiful dance of verbal and nonverbal communication. Dr. Eleanor Rossi joined her, a tablet in hand. "The latest results are extraordinary," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "The awakening is spreading, but slowly, naturally. It's as if the compound activated a potential that was always there, waiting to be unlocked." Emily nodded, watching as Lucy guided a young orangutan through what appeared to be a complex problem-solving exercise. "And Biosynth, dismantled," Elena replied with satisfaction. "Their executives are facing trial, and their research has been turned over to an international scientific committee. Marcus Sterling himself is cooperating, apparently quite humbled by what he witnessed in the bunker." The walkers approached, Looking more relaxed than Emily had ever seen them, Catherine smiled warmly. "We've just finished our call with the UN task force. They've agreed to our proposals for protecting the awakened individuals and integrating them into society." Richard added, "More importantly, they've accepted our guidelines for ethical research. No more exploitation, no more secrets. Everything we learn will be shared openly with the world." As they spoke, Emily noticed a subtle shift in the air. The children and primates below had stopped their activities and were looking up at the sky. Lucy made a series of gestures, pointing excitedly. "What is it?" Emily asked, scanning the horizon. Catherine's eyes widened. "They're coming." In the distance, shapes appeared in the sky, at first mistakable for birds, but soon revealing themselves to be a pod of dolphins, somehow flying through the air as if it were water. Behind them, a family of elephants lumbered through the sky, trumpeting joyously. "It's not just primates," Richard breathed. "The awakening. It's spreading to other species." As they watched in awe, more animals appeared, wolves running on air, eagles larger than any on record, and creatures Emily couldn't even name, all converging on the research center. Thomas toddled out onto the balcony, Lucy close behind. The boy reached up, and a shimmering dolphin lowered its head to gently nuzzle him. In that touch, Emily could almost feel the flow of communication, of understanding between species that had been separated for millions of years. "This is it," Elena said softly. "The next step, not just human evolution, but the evolution of life itself on Earth." Emily felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to see Lucy holding out a tablet. On the screen was a message typed in perfect English. "We are ready to truly talk. All of us. Will you listen?" Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We're ready to listen." As the sun set on this extraordinary day, casting a golden light over the assembled humans and animals, Emily realized that this was not an ending, but a beginning. The barriers between species, between different forms of consciousness, were falling away. A new era of understanding and coexistence was dawning. Thomas laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to resonate with every being present. Lucy's eyes met Emily's, filled with intelligence, compassion, and hope for the future they would build together. In that moment, Emily understood that her journey, from a night shift nurse to a witness of evolutionary history, had been leading to this all along. The story of humanity was expanding, intertwining with the stories of every living thing on the planet. As night fell and stars began to twinkle above, the assembled creatures, human, primate, and beyond, gazed up at the cosmos together. In their shared consciousness, a new question formed. What other wonders awaited them, not just on Earth, but in the vast expanse of the universe? The awakening had begun, and with it, a future limited only by the bounds of imagination and the depth of compassion that all species could achieve together.